Just for the record, I've never actually eaten an elephant, but I think this is really a good metaphor for what we're going to be talking about today. The whole concept of if you were going to eat an elephant, how would you eat it? Obviously, the answer is one bite at a time. You would not try and eat the whole thing at once. I think what we've seen historically in the game industry is these products have become huge. They're elephants. You got your World of Warcrafts, your Modern Warfare 2s, Halos, Guitar Heroes, products like that. They're just the products that can last for years in terms of usage from the average consumer. And really, the industry has not really properly monetized that. And DFC Intelligence, we were founded way back in 1994. So just as a forewarning of everything you hear today, you always have to take with a grain of salt, because back in the time we were founded, we were really focused on digital distribution. We were looking at the music industry. We were looking at issues of shareware and really thinking of how this market was going to change once things went to online and digital distribution models. But this was back 15, 16 years ago. And today, we're still talking about those same issues. I think the goal today is to really present some evidence that we are reaching a tipping point where what we were talking about 15 years ago is now becoming a reality in the marketplace. So I'm going to be presenting a lot of numbers focused on some recent studies we've done, really looking at core gamers. These are these consumers who are actually out there spending money today, the consumers who made Modern Warfare 2 such a massive hit, the consumers that subscribe to World of Warcraft for the past 5 years, the consumers that have made Guitar Hero and the DS the most popular systems around in recent years. And so what we've been doing is really focusing on what are these consumers doing? How are their behaviors changed now that the technology is caught up and we're going online? So I'm going to be presenting a lot of numbers, but if you want a copy of the presentation, don't feel you have to write them down. Just hand me a card with slides written on the back of it, and we'll be sure to send out a presentation to you. But our theory, going way back to 1994, is that the game business model, where every product sells for about $50 at retail, no matter how much entertainment value it provides, it's just whacked. It's not a sustainable model. But we've had that theory. I mean, we had that back in the mid-1990s, and we saw Sony really started bringing down the prices in the late 1990s with the first PlayStation, of starting to bring the prices down to $40, and then doing life cycle pricing where they're able to get products that have been in the marketplace for a while down closer to the $20 range. But what just amazed us is how long the industry has been able to sustain those prices and even bring those prices up. With the launch of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, they were able to bring the prices back up to $60. And I think really what that says is the fact that those prices remained so high for so long was really just a testament to how much people like games and how it's such an important part of modern society. And consumers today are just, games is as important to them, the average consumer growing up today, as television or movies were to the previous generation. And it's really, why I got into this industry was looking at it back in the early 90s when I was looking at the music industry and saying, wow, once this industry goes to digital distribution, you're going to have problems, because your product is really individual songs that you've managed to package up into this thing called albums. But once digital distribution comes along, you're going to be able to break those songs up into individual bits. And consumers are going to go back to the way they originally started, of buying products on a individual song basis. And clearly, that happened in the industry. It took, a good 10 years after we first started talking about it, but it had a huge impact on the music industry. And at the time, the reason I went into games was because I saw games as being a lot different. I saw, first of all, this whole generation that was growing up, that was born in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Games were more important to them than music. And really, it was different than the generation, the baby boomer generation, that grew up with music as their kind of cultural glue. This generation that's just now coming of age, games was their cultural glue. And the other thing I saw, games are really a type of product that it's not just an individual song. Sure, you can sell individual game components, but they're part of a larger, what we've been talking about a lot, as a service. And really is just a matter of technology, basically broadband penetration and having the storage capacity for the end user to catch up and allow for all these new pricing. And so we're showing that really the game industry is going back in many ways to its roots, where back in the old days, Space Invaders, you popped in a quarter at a time, and this became a multi-billion-dollar industry. It was a very different industry in the sense that a product like Space Invaders, you had to capture that money by having consumers pump in a quarter after a quarter after a quarter until it all added up. And of course, at the end of the day, you would check each machine, and the machines that didn't have quarters in them, you'd replace that with another machine. And that's really what drove the industry. But once it started to enter the homes, it was really a very different matter. You have the home cartridges, and they had a very high cost of goods. The price of games, really had to start at $30 just because of the cost of the goods and delivering them. So I think what it showed is that it took about 15 years. It's really hard to know exactly because there was not good tracking of how much was spent at the arcades and back in the 70s and 80s. But we estimate that it took until the early 1990s before home game revenue really started to reach the arcade revenue at its peak, which meant the industry for many, many years was able to make more money by getting consumers to spend 25 cents at a time, even though they were spending $30 at a time on games. I think what we really learned is that people, they just love games, and they also love to play them at home. And they're really willing to pay a pretty high price to do that. But really, the technology has limited how these games can be delivered to the consumers in the home, and it's forced these artificially high prices for many products. On the other hand, it's also limited the amount of money that can be generated from the more successful products. And I think what we see is that with Economics 101, basically, once you start giving consumers more efficient options, they're going to take them. And clearly, I think this is going to start to happen pretty quickly. So if we look at the economics of the game industry over the past 20 or so years, basically you have Game A, Game B. They both sell for $50 at retail. Game A, maybe it's fun for 2 hours. There's so many games, especially in the early days, that you could finish them in 2 or 3 hours. And you're paying $50, and you're $25 per hour, versus games that last for 100 hours or more, and you're paying, nothing, 50 cents an hour at a price of $50. So clearly, Game A, when you have other options, that is just not sustainable. But on the other hand, with Game B, the market is clearly undervaluing the product. One thing we like to do is compare other forms of entertainment. So just, a very basic example that everybody can understand is the idea of you pay $10 to go to a movie for 2 hours of entertainment, or $5 an hour. So, under that assumption, you can say, okay, well, say a game's not as valuable as going to a movie. Say it's only $1 an hour, and based on 2 hours of usage, Game A should cost $2, Game B should cost $100. And obviously, you can double that, triple it, whatever. But still, I think we're still learning, and consumers, I think, are the ones who are still learning this, of how exactly do they go about valuing these games. And it's really changing as we introduce new methods. They're still, I think, trying to figure out how to make the most effective choices of their time and money. And so consumers, in their mind, they're still learning how to value these products. I don't think they're quite clear that, but we know that as you give these consumers more choices, that just Economics 101 once again teaches us they're going to start making more efficient decisions.